Hi, I'm John, and welcome back to Dice Paper Miniatures. In this episode, we're going to look at the new pre-order for this coming Saturday, specifically for the new upcoming Ash Waste for Necromunda. Let's begin. Okay, so we're back at it, and this time, all these releases that were just announced, it seems like yesterday, right, at Adepticon, they basically have all been coming out like one right after another. So next Saturday, which is basically the end of April, we have the new Necromunda Ash Waste coming out. And there's been a lot of speculation on the cost of this one, and I'll talk about what I think that price point will be later in the episode. So let's carry on here. Okay, so here's a glamour shot of the box, the rule book, the reference sheets, the chits, the board, the cards, the dice, the templates, terrain, and most importantly, the models. So, yeah, a lot of stuff. We'll see if it's worth the price point here, though. So here we have the two gangs within the box. We have your Ash Waste Nomads. So it looks like we get a standard 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 models, including 4 mounted models on the Dustback Hellamites. Speaking of Dustback Hellamites, I just posted an article discussing their war gear mechanics, so you can check that out in a link posted somewhere up above. All right. And then we have the Orlocks. It looks like this is the standard 10 gang unit that you get normally, that we've been able to get for the last few years. But they're introducing just 2 of the buggies. I actually thought there might have been up to 4, but we're just getting 2. Okay, so the box includes 2 complete gangs, right? 10 Orlocks on foot and 2 hardy Outrider quads, right? And the never-before-seen Ash Waste Nomad gangs, exactly, with the 4 Dustback Hellamites. All right. Then we have the terrain piece here. I do like this new terrain. It's definitely a departure of what we might expect for terrain, not just for Necromunda, but for 40K in general. But I do dig it. I think there's a lot of potential of integrating this into a lot of different scenarios. So this is one of the items I was really most interested in, was this new rule book. Just how comprehensive was it? Because depending on the iteration of Necromunda you've bought in the past, sometimes this rule book is kind of light, and then you need to get all the other expansions, of course, or they give you a really nice comprehensive book. So let's see what we get with this rule book, if it goes into any details. So let's carry on here. The box includes everything else you need to play Necromunda. There are tokens, cards, dice, and templates, a playing mat, and an updated rule book. Okay, so even though they showed the rule book before these other components, the article goes on to say the box includes everything else you need to play Necromunda. There are tokens, cards, dice, templates, a playing mat, and an updated rulebook, which features all the basic rules for the game, indoor and outdoor, as well as new rules for mounted fighters and vehicles. Everything's been updated and clarified for this new edition. That's cool, but is it just the new rules for mounted fighters and vehicles just for the factions or gangs that are in this particular new box? Is it just for the Nomads and the Orlocks? Or is it for all gangs? It's a little misleading, because historically the format for all of these box sets has been the rules for the included gangs, right? Usually 2, whether it's Goliaths and Eschers. Heck, I may even backtrack on that, because they've always released separate house books. That happened definitely with Dark Uprising. They really didn't need to do it with Hive Wars, but they sort of did with Hive Wars, because they were still coming out with the release of the House of Chains, the House of Iron, the House of Shadows, etc. And those also had new model expansion lines for each one of those. So when the original Underhive came out, they released compendium books, if you will, that delved more deeply into each gang or house. And then when Dark Uprising came out, they kind of started off with releasing all the new houses, their expansion books and models. And then they kind of came out with Hive Wars kind of out of left field, to be honest. And that continued the release of those expansions all the way up through Delac. that's the gang in particular that I play the most, and it seems like that's the one that always comes out last with their expanded rules, expanded model lines. It is what it is. But going back to the article here, I don't know for sure if it's going to be for every gang. It would be nice if it was. Obviously, I want to play with all of my models right now so I can start kit bashing anything for Deloc or Goliaths or whatever, right? Don't know for sure. It's a little vague, and I want to say it's concerning, but it's to be expected too. A little bit of vagueness is just how these things roll. So let's look at the components. So standard AoE component, standard range template, the standard Necromunda dice, but these yellow dice are for the new vehicle rules. So that's cool. And then we have the cardboard or heavy board mats that they use. I would love to see these be switched over to neoprene at some point, but I guess that leaves a market available, right, for third parties to create really cool printed neoprene mats. So that's the one upside to GW not doing them, I guess. It allows for other vendors to do a thing. And then we have just the quick reference sheets, and then the chits, of course. And then lastly, just another shot of the models here. I dig these sculpts. They are, I think, amazing. They're great as is, but I think you could do a lot of customization to them too. I'm not entirely sold on the weird backpacks with the I guess the sun block for the necks. That's how I see it. Like back in the 80s, they sold the ball caps with like the little neck protectors to keep, from having literally a red neck. They have hoods, so it's not like they really need another layer of sunblock, if you will, or shade, but visually it's interesting. But I could see those elements being removed too, if you want something that looks a little bit more of your standard sci-fi, Fallout, Wasteland Warrior kind of thing. Either way, very cool sculpts and a lot of customization options, I think. And then we have the Hellamite or Dustback Hellamites. These are pretty cool. They're growing on me. And I kind of joked in a previous article about how in Necromunda, instead of the fleas riding the vermin, it's the vermin riding the fleas. So yeah. And then the other kind of joke going around is the only good bug is a dead bug. So for the most part, I dig them. I'm not sold on the horn element, but it is kind of an interesting way how they tied in like the reins of the critter to the horn. That makes sense. But I still would love to see an option where we could put these on motorcycles. That's just me. But that would be cool too, to see some options if they ever release like motorcycles for another maybe nomad tribe, and you can tie these in together. Maybe that's going to be a future expansion, kind of like they did with every other gang in this game so far, right? They've kind of done expansions where they get some different types of options for builds. Maybe we get like a motorcycle or a dune buggy build for the nomads. That would be really neat. Another thing that looks interesting in this particular release, it looks like it's implied that these tactic cards for both the nomads and the Orlocks are included in the box this time. Usually these components are the types of things that are sold separately. So let's see if it goes in specifics. So it says deploy Cunning Ash Waste Nomad tactics with this card pack. Sure, yep. It comes with 18 gang-specific tactics to earn you the upper hand in your games. It also includes 8 fighter cards so you can track the stats, skills, and weapons of the nomads. Doesn't say if it's in the box. Let's go back up to the box component announcement. Tokens, cards. So it says cards, but usually the box games have like basic cards, but I can't say for 100% certain that it will have the individual gang tactic cards. I mean, this is supposed to be an article that's everything about the box. So I have to, I guess, assume that these are going to be in the box as well. But that makes me wonder, will they be sold separately down the road? Especially if you don't get this one big box set, but you get things kind of a la carte down the road. You can buy the gang separately. You could always buy the dice separately. You could buy the card pack separately. I guess we'll find out. So in this shot, we have just the 2 Orlock Outrider quads. And for the most part, I do dig these. Just because I'm an 80s kid, I would love to see these as a trike option, but I get it. Quads were a thing then too. Just 3-wheelers were like a big deal back in the 80s. So, and whenever I think of burly bikers, I still think of the visual of motorcycles or 3-wheelers. trikes, right? But safety first, even in Necromunda. Oh, man. And then, of course, we have the Orlok Vehicle Gang Tactic cards as well. Again, I'm hoping these are in the box. And then your gang will need some new tactics to survive the Ash Waste. And similarly to the cards that we got for the Nomads, the ones for the Orloks has the Vehicle Gang Tactic cards, which they say help you pull off audacious vehicle gambits in the heat of battle. There are also 8 blank fighter cards for your mounted fighters from the House of Iron. All right, so, and then we get a cool map, actually. The Carta Galactica, the Western Hemisphere of Necromunda. So that's pretty cool. They've spoiled this map at different, cropped images and a number of articles leading up to this announcement. So it'll be cool to get that whole map. I hope if it's not like overly folded, that might be something worth framing, depending on how large it is and how bad, like how many folds are in this particular thing. But I don't typically frame the maps, but I might this one. I really like Necromunda, which is, again, why I want to talk about the price point here in a minute. So in regards to the map, it says it's printed on heavyweight poster paper, and it's significantly larger than an A1 size, which if you're in the US, A1 is kind of comparable to letter size, but it's a little bit, I think it's a little narrower and it's slightly taller, but this map is bigger than that, so that makes sense. So it's definitely going to have some fold. It probably like an 8-fold, maybe. It's great for plotting out your campaigns amongst the dunes and features enough places of interest to whet the appetite of even the most grizzled ganger. Dig it. All right. Orlok upgrades. This is cool. New backpacks and new head options. And I think these head options are different than even the recent Orlok weapons and upgrade sprues. So that's cool. It definitely has that biker vibe with the air breather mask. So, and the bandanas, and a couple different options between helmed and unhelmeted versions. Right on. Again, safety first, even in Necromunda. All right, so that's it for all the components that they're showing us so far for this new Ash Waste. Again, I have to assume because they're showing those tactic cards on this article that they will be included in the box. The box typically do come with some cards, just like the neutral or generic tactic cards, objective cards, etc. But I just wish there was a little bit more clarity between those cards. Are they actually included for the individual gangs? And then also the rule book, I really would like to know. Let's see. Yeah. Is it the rules for all the different houses, or is it just for specifically like generic rules for all the generic vehicles, or is it just specific to each house? I might be overcomplicating things, but I think it does matter because GW does a great job of showing a lot of cool components for these announcements, but then you kind of find out a little bit later that you still have to buy these separate things. And if you recall back when the actual Adepticon preview hit, it was either during that one or an article that came shortly thereafter. They showed a release schedule of a number of different expansions. And I have to assume this is all the vehicle rules for like generic stuff, but there's going to be supplements or compendiums. Take your pick of what word you like the most. But there's going to be expansions that probably go into even more vehicles that are specific to each individual gang or house in the future. That just seems to be the obvious thing that's going to happen with GW, with how they roll with their expansions. Okay, so the cost of this thing. I have a few different comparisons. So the most recent Hive War is 170. There's no way this is costing 170. Everything's basically new except for just those 10 Orlok models. So you have a whole new gang. You have upgrades to the Orloks, which those themselves would probably cost $25 on a sprue. And then you have the new quads. There's only 2, but it's still new quads. And then for the Nomads, you have the Dustback Helamites. So a lot of plastic, even though the actual terrain bits don't look like a lot, I think it will add up more than you might expect. So definitely not 170. If we look at some other comparables, Dark Uprising, when it was announced, it was 290. It doesn't have as much plastic, clearly, as Dark Uprising. So I don't expect it to be 290 or like a 310. That seems to be another number that sometimes gets thrown about. I don't expect that. But if it's not 170 and it's not 290, Kill Team, I feel, has a comparable offering, but again, the terrain's not new in those. It's still old terrain. And that's at a price point of 195. Now, if we look at Warcry with Red Harvest, which is comparable, all new terrain, a similar loadout of cards, dice, templates, 2 new factions though, technically. War bands for Warcry, of course, but it's at 220. I would be inclined to believe, and we may know this by the time I get this video out, but my initial guesstimate was between 195 and 220, and it probably skews towards 220, which I'm not excited about, but that's the world we live in right now. It's definitely a bummer. Rarely does GW ever get cheaper on their prices, so if Warcry Red Harvest was 220, it's not necessarily an apples to apples comparison, but it probably will be close to 220, if not more. I would love to see it at that 195 price point, which means it would only be $25 more than the previous starter set, Hive War. But this Hive War really, it was way stripped down compared to Dark Uprising. And I just don't expect, with all the new components in this new Ash Waste, right? Here's a full glamour shot. There's almost no way this is at 195, especially with that being a hardbound rulebook. Even if it doesn't have all the rules for all the gangs, it's still a hardbound rulebook, all new terrain, 3 force, maybe arguably 5-6 new models. And if it really does have those card packs that are specific to the Nomads and the Orlocks included, which are normally around $15 or $18 now per pack, yeah, this is probably, I hate to say it, realistically, it's probably around a 220, if not like a 240 or higher price point. It's really hard to know for sure because we don't have any points of reference for any of the price increases for Necromunda just yet. And I guess we're going to find out. So, very cool set. I wish they were more clear on the, are those gang specific tactic cards included? And are all the houses or gangs covered in the rulebook, or is it just going to be generic vehicles and rule specific just for the Nomads and just specific for these new updated Orlocks? Hopefully we'll find out soon, because people got some early pre-release copies, and we'll probably see those unboxings coming out here real soon. And speaking of unboxings, GW just put out another article at the time of recording, and it looks like we're going to see specifically what cards are included. They actually show the sprues in this one. That's cool. All right, so it says this box contains a total of 89 cards representing road sections and trade routes to help keep track of the routes every player holds over the course of Ash Waste campaign, as well as whole host of Ash Waste gang tactics for either side. So I think that answers it. They didn't show the pictures of the exteriors of the boxes. That's probably me just being nitpicky. But it says for either side. So I have to assume it's for either side. All right. Anything else? Let's see if it goes. Okay. More on the rules as well. Speaking of new rules, they're all included in a big, beautiful book for your playing convenience. This serves as the complete repository of rules for the base game, covering indoor and outdoor scuffles and updating more than a few sections from the previous editions. That's cool. As well as containing all the basic rules, the Ash Waste rulebook contains a unique new campaign that focuses on four-wheel skirmishes out in the wilderness, trade in endless hab blocks, and dark hive tunnels for wild, wide open battles over vital trade routes. Okay, I want to know the specifics though. All right, the Ash Waste campaign can be played using any Necromunda gang, not just those in the box, and guidelines for including different gangs are included. There are tons of new outdoor rules, including new mechanics for controlling roads, creating trade routes, and becoming raiders. It's talking about campaigns for every gang. I have to assume that also means things like the war gear, the vehicle rules for every war gang. So if we do get expanded books, it's just going to probably be new vehicles and things like that that they're not showing yet in this core set. I can't imagine they don't do new books as well. All right, so a little bit more clarity, especially for the cards, what is actually included, and at least some rules for all the gangs in this new book. So the book itself is a must have because it also has updated rules as well as just the general vehicle rules. So, yeah, anything else that we haven't discussed? Okay, so I'm glad I took a look one more time before I went to editing this video. So there's definitely some more clarity, which is helpful. But that's it for this one. Again, I think the cost point is around 220. It may be higher. It is what it is. I'd like to know what your thoughts are about this new expansion. You know, aside from the cost, does this new setting appeal to you? For me, I do like it. I do like that we get some rules for vehicles now because I love kit bashing vehicles. If you play games like Gaslands, I love doing stuff for Gaslands. So this is going to scratch that itch as well. But again, what are your thoughts on that? And then the price point. Do you think that 220 is a legitimate price point for this, or are we just getting like, are we starting to price people out of the game? That's probably a redundant question because it gets asked like every couple years, no matter what. But what are your thoughts on that? Please consider commenting below. I definitely appreciate your feedback. And as always, if you enjoyed this content and you haven't yet, please consider subscribing, hitting the notification bell, and sharing with your friends. It really does help with the growth of the channel, and it's greatly appreciated. Well, that's it for this one. A little bit longer, possibly. Depends on where it lands on the edit. But yeah, I hope you're all doing well. Be safe, take care, and I'll see you all again soon. Bye-bye.